Ooh boy, this is absolutely not the topic that I thought we would be bringing up today. Because today's video goes over the Chicago Blackhawks and their best player, unequivocally, a guy who needs a new contract, in franchise first overall pick, Connor Bedard. Let's get into the latest in regards to Connor Bedard and his situation. He's 20 years old, 5'10", 190, a right-handed center left wing, and his entry-level contract expires at the end of 25-26. He is eligible for an extension, of which he is yet to sign. And when it comes to the latest, as talked about by Irfan Gaffar and the Fourth Period on the Daily Faceoff Rundown show, turns out Connor Bedard might not actually be too happy of a camper right now. Let's dive into the scoop. So this was posted 2 days ago, DFO Rundown Insider Edition, Panyota, Gaffar, it's the show, it's the program, and I wanted to give a big shout out over to Canucks News Summaries, who summarized all of the notes that were talked about in this episode. There's a conversation on the Boston Bruins, there's talk about Vancouver, Washington, Toronto, New Jersey. The Simon Nemec trade request is a pretty big deal. Whether or not that actually happened, who knows? But then there's this update on the Chicago Blackhawks and Connor Bedard. Irfan Gaffar has heard that the Blackhawks have had contract talks with Connor Bedard, and the Bedard side has not liked what the Blackhawks have presented to him. In this normal negotiation, Bedard and the Blackhawks have discussed different terms. He is hearing $14 million to $16 million AAV, depending on the term. Also, in regards to Chicago, they are willing to trade the 4th overall pick in a package in order to add an impact player. They have interest in Matthew Knies as well. Chicago wants to add the right complementary wingers to fit in with Bedard and Anton Frondell. And finally, there's an update on Ilya Mikheyev. He won't be back unless something completely changes in negotiations. He'll generate a lot of interest as a UFA. He had a lot of interest at the trade deadline because other teams want to extend him. Now, I'll just say this right here at the beginning of this entire thing. The day that Ilya Mikheyev becomes a coveted UFA on the market is the day that I start laughing at the hockey gods in their face, because this is absolutely not the way I think anybody in my side of town thought things would go with Mikheyev. Obviously, y'all know I'm a Vancouver guy, so seeing Mikheyev go from the bum that he was in Vancouver to more of a goal scorer with some decently coveted interest in free agency, that is absolutely mind-boggling to me. Congrats to Ilya Mikheyev. You proved everybody in the city of Vancouver wrong about your level of skill. And I know that he had 31 points in 78 games with the Canucks, but that big 0 in 11 games is what stands out to me the most when you talk about what he had done in the playoffs in 2024. If Ilya Mikheyev just buried that Game 7 empty net chance that he had against the Oilers, Vancouver may have gone to the promised land. Who really knows? But that's neither here nor there. This video is about Connor Bedard, a guy whose contract negotiations with Chicago are going a pretty interesting way. The Bedard side has not liked what the Blackhawks have presented to him. It is interesting that it's noted here. It is a normal negotiation, so obviously it's not like there's any acrimony here, but with Chicago placing themselves in a spot to set up the NHL, essentially with the next generation's worth of dollar amounts for these young guys, you can understand why they might be lowballing Bedard a little bit. At least that's what the implication is here. If Bedard's side is like, hey, we don't really like these contract offers, they're not really hitting. $14 to $16 million AAV, depending on the term. I do kind of wonder how far that goes. Like, if you're only looking at 3 to 4 years, are you going 14 mil? But then if you go to 8 years, you're looking at 16? If that's the case, then it's a pretty big bargain to go up to 8 years and get that $16 million AAV, right? It would still be a decent amount behind Kirill Kaprizov and what we had seen out of the Minnesota Wild. Obviously, Bill Carril's making $17 million a year per season starting this upcoming year. That's an 8-year contract, and it's the biggest contract in the league. $16 million right underneath Kaprizov for the majority of Connor Bedard's prime years, from 21 all the way until 28 years old. That sounds like a pretty big bargain when you lay it out like that. I understand that some may question the production and whether or not Connor Bedard is really worth a $14 to $16 million AAV deal, especially when you compare it to the expectations. I mean, when this guy debuted at 18 years old, there were some folks out there in the scouting world that said, hey, Bedard might have the potential to be a 100-point player in his first NHL season. Now, of course, we understand that didn't happen. He had 61 points in 68 games, but then again, he had 61 points in 68 games as an 18-year-old. This season, he was way over a point per game, 75 points in 69 games. If he had played the full season, he would have had around 90-ish points. That's not bad at all for a guy who is 20 years old. He probably should have made the Olympic team. If he was just a little bit bigger, he probably would have. Bedard is one of the frontliners of the next generation's worth of top-tier NHL superstars. Him, Celebrini, hopefully Gavin McKenna, Matthew Schaefer's already in there. We already know this. But Bedard is going to be a stud. And so already thinking about dollar amounts and contract numbers, if it is to a point where he doesn't even get the highest AAV, which I don't think Connor Bedard would get anything over 17 million, just circumstantially, I think it's easy for Chicago to give the benefit of the doubt there. I don't really see it going any higher than 16 million AAV, but once it gets to 15, 16, that's when the status quo becomes set. NHL Trade Alert went out there and posted this. It's Elliotte Friedman's 32 Thoughts podcast clip from yesterday. Elliotte spoke about the next wave of young stars and their contracts. Celebrini, Bedard, Fantilli, Carlson, Gauthier. He wonders who signs first and how it could affect the other contracts. He calls Celebrini a unicorn, and he says San Jose will have to give him whatever he asks for. Chicago may just give Bedard a big number because he is their franchise player, and not care about the rest. So Friedman is kind of saying the opposite here, that yeah, if Chicago were to be told, yeah, Bedard wants 16, he wants 18, whatever, then maybe Chicago goes out there and does it because it's Connor Bedard, and they have no real skin in the game if Bedard decides to leave and he gets unhappy. There's no positive outcome if that ends up going down. Almost exactly the same as what happened with Kirill Kaprizov in the Wild. Kaprizov essentially was like, yeah, well, I'm pretty talented and I'm really good, so I can go wherever it is that I want and I can get as much money as I want. If you really want me here, Minnesota, you're going to have to pay up. You're going to have to increase the total AAV max ceiling from 14 million all the way to 17. Screw Draisaitl and Matthews. I'm better than those guys and I'm a winger. You got to give me money to stay. And that's exactly what Minnesota did. Who knows if they'll do the same thing with Quinn Hughes now. But Connor Bedard, I feel like he is in a position where if he did the same thing that Kirill did, it wouldn't be all too bad. Like, Chicago, they have a number of things they need to improve up front. Locking down Connor Bedard is the biggest one. So hearing out of initial reports that the Bedard party has not liked what the Blackhawks have presented to them, obviously, that's not really the best way to start out, but then again, it is just a starting out thing. Also, like, it's hard to feel disappointed if $14 million is the floor of what they are offering you. At least that's the way it seems based off the way they talked about it on the show. So with all that said, you can let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. How do you feel about the Chicago Blackhawks potentially lowballing Connor Bedard for now? I have no doubt that by the time this upcoming season comes and goes, Connor Bedard would have already signed. He'll be making $15 million a year, maybe for 5 years or whatever, and that's going to be it. You know, it's not going to be too difficult to get this done. Bedard's really good, and Chicago has the money. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about this Bedard contract negotiation. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.